Here we go. All right. So not only is it the best day ever, but looking ahead, I just want to kind of give you some dates. We are going to meet tomorrow just to keep plowing ahead with stuff, moving fast. But then next week, we will not meet on Monday or on Friday. So we will be rocking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. I know those of y'all that are commuters, I want to be sure, and really, especially if you're commuting and you want to be in the room, I want to be sure that you don't make a wasted trip, spend fuel money, all of that fun stuff going on. So again, also stay tuned. I'll know something by tomorrow. I think our first test is going to be on Monday. I am learning how to do that in a Blackboard format that's pretty similar to the way that I've done it before. It will be a fill in the blank thing. You'll set it. Once you open the test, you'll have a certain amount of time to get it done. I'm still learning how to do that, so we'll make all this work together. So just sort of stay tuned. Trust me, we might not be ready for Monday. I'm trying to make good use of that time, though. So we'll just stay tuned and check in. Now, what I might do is, I've got a long list of stuff to get going, and I'm actually going to come over here. Since I'm not going to be here Monday, I'm going to come over here Saturday and hammer through some stuff when the office is quiet. And I might come and shoot one Zoom for you and post the link and let you know, kind of just depending on where we are. So just keep checking your email, staying checked in with everything. So got it when you got it? Right. And then also too, not just checking your email. I love it when I can send you a quick text about, hey, I posted a new video just for you. Go find it. Okay, everybody good? All right. So we are in chapter 1, starting to rock and talk about structure and function in the body. And one of the things that we always need to remember is, I'm working off the premise that each of you have had A&P, or you're in the process of rocking and talking some A&P. So we're going to really move pretty fast with this. Okay, so jump in, and it's almost like, again, remember, we built the foundation. We built the foundation. So again, if you happen to be experiencing thoughts of dread or worry, what kind of anxiety would you have? Cognitive. So let go of any of your cognitive anxiety. Use your selective attention to drown out all the noise and get checked in right here as things move forward. Okay? So what we need to know is, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Let's just say that all of a sudden you won the lottery, okay? And you happen to be a car freak. I kind of like cars, okay? I like nice cars. Okay, so are you a car person, Calvin? Yeah. Car person? You win the lottery. Tell me what car you're going to buy. Go.
Jaguar.
Going to buy a Jag. Okay, so all of a sudden, Calvin has his Jag. He's loving life. Life is good. Got more money in the bank. Everything is going. You're enjoying it. You're sharing it, which is what you always should do. All of these things, driving your Jag. Well, all of a sudden, remember, if it's mechanical, it can fail. So let's just say that Calvin has car trouble, Jag trouble. Okay, are you going to take it to the mechanic down the street that really doesn't know anything about Jaguars? Or are you taking it to the Jaguar dealership? Going to the dealership. What you need to know, with you being in this field of strength and conditioning, of fitness, of training, all of these things, it's your job to be a body specialist mechanic. You need to know, just like that mechanic is going to really fine-tune things with that Jaguar instead of that 1984 Honda Accord, you need to understand, the better you know anatomy, the better trainer, the better coach, the better strength and conditioning coach you can be. You have to know how the machine works. And so that's what it starts to talk to us about in that second paragraph on page 2. It says the strength and conditioning professional must have an understanding of the musculoskeletal functions, but also all of those systems. Now, I gave you a teaser alert yesterday, and I gave you some information. Let's see if it stuck. Remember that thing we talked about, check for understanding, yesterday? All right, so you have all these different systems. You have your muscular system, your skeletal system, your digestive system. Of all the systems in the body, which one arrives first to create change? Nervous system, awesome. Okay, so your nervous system is critical to the success of your body. So we need to know how all of these systems directly support working musculature. Because here's the thing, it is our job to increase athletic performance. It is our job to increase quality of life. What if all of a sudden you realized that you were designing a strength and conditioning program that was making athletes less powerful, less forceful? Would you be fired or rehired? You'd be fired. So this is one of these things. You have to know the product that you are dealing with. So again, we start to talk now about the musculoskeletal system. Okay, so here's what we know. This consists really and truly of bones, joints, muscles, tendons, and ligaments. Quick question. What connects a bone to a bone? A ligament, excellent. What connects a muscle to a bone? A tendon, okay? 115. We changed to 115 start. It's okay. You might have been checked out for a minute yesterday. That's okay. Remember to talk about selective attention? It's all good. All right, so what we know is ligaments connect what? Bone to bone. Tendons connect what? Very nice. And then all throughout this body, we have this incredible structure called our fascia. And so our muscle fascia acts like this outer casing on every single one of our muscles. And knowing how these things work and knowing how they come together and how they move efficiently and effectively. Now, here's another, let's just remember from yesterday. Your body will respond to whatever you ask it to. Your body will respond to, your body will respond to, Sarah, whatever you ask it to. Now, in knowing that, hey, remind me, what kind of people are you? Smart people. So if you're asking your body to increase its strength by a properly designed program, you're going to see this change in the musculature and change in this fascial network. So let me ask you a question. Has anybody in here ever heard of or had plantar fasciitis? You've heard of it. Where is plantar fasciitis located? On the sole of your feet, okay? Now, what happens is that fascia all of a sudden becomes really tight and rigid. Do you think that the outer casing of every one of your muscles is supposed to be tight and rigid or soft and fluid and full of movement? Not fluid. How about elastic? It's supposed to be elastic and moving with the muscle, yes or no? Yes. So what happens when you end up with a fascial issue? You end up, whenever that muscle tries to stretch, now granted, I mean, do you have muscles in the bottom of your foot? Absolutely you do. So whenever those muscles try to stretch, that fascial network doesn't allow them to move. And if the muscle's trying to move, but it's stuck in a tight casing, does that feel fabulous or does that feel terrible? It feels terrible. That's why people that have plantar fasciitis, whenever you wake up in the morning and you try to put your feet on the ground to start walking, your feet are so miserable. So that's why all these things with the fascia network is so important. So what are some things that we can do to keep our fascia healthy? And this isn't in the book. This is real life training. Rolling out, yes, all these things with myofascial release. Awesome. What else, Jane? Did you say something else? Okay. What did you say? Okay. So everything that we can do to stretch, I tell people you can only be as strong as you are long. If you are not spending time in mobility training, especially as an athlete, you are not getting as strong as you can. If you consistently have tight hips, which I'm going to look at my male athletes in the room, males typically have tighter hip flexors and are really tight through the hips. So if you do not have that full range of mobility, how in the world can you perform at your maximum capability? So think about all those things that you pour into this musculoskeletal system. Okay, So within your body, you actually have, we're going to talk skeleton first. So what I'm going off of is the fact that you know every single one of these bones. On page 3, you got to know every single one of them. That will be on game day. So you better train for knowing those bones. Most of you should say, I already know that.
So this gonna be on the test Monday? Oh yeah.
I don't know about the date.
Oh.
Just hang, but this will be on game day. Okay, this will be a game day play. So really, you got to know this play. So you got to train for it if you don't know it. And for those of you that are either taking anatomy right now or you've already had anatomy, if you've already had anatomy, you're like, oh, this is a review. Or if you're taking it now, it's going to help you in your anatomy class as well. So you've got to know all of those. So as you look at this skeleton on page 3, we talk about your axial skeleton and your appendicular skeleton. So your axial skeleton consists of your skull, your vertebral column, your ribs, and your sternum. Okay, so look at that. It's your skull, your vertebral column, your sternum, and your ribs. Now, I like to give weird analogies, and if you don't know that by now, you're probably figuring that out because it lets you remember things. So has anyone in here ever cleaned a fish? I know that sounds weird. Filleted fish, have you ever filleted fish? All of a sudden you catch fish, and we do it with an electric knife because it's really fast. You go kind of behind the gill, you pull it up, you slice down, you turn the knife, and you go against that vertebral column. So can anyone in their mind picture a fish skeleton? First off, do fish have arms and legs? No, it's living fins, but they don't have bones there in those fins. Okay, so your axial skeleton, okay? Put your hand on your head. It's your head, it's your spinal column, it's your rib cage, and your sternum. Those are those 4 parts of your axial skeleton. Now, then you have your appendicular skeleton. This word comes from the word appendages. So your appendages basically are your arms and your legs. That basically, and that pelvis, it's things that basically, think about this. If I were to all of a sudden separate your hip girdle from your vertebral column, it's things that would fall to the ground. So think about your appendicular skeleton, okay? If all of a sudden I pulled you right here, your hips would fall and your legs would fall to the ground. And then if all of a sudden I yanked Aaron's arm away, it would all of a sudden fall off, okay? So think about this. These are like Pinocchio, those things that would fall off, those appendages. Good catch. Okay, say got it when you got it.
Got it.
Awesome. Now, here's what's interesting. You guys, the appendicular skeleton and the axial skeleton need each other. Okay, so as you stop and think about this, be reminded that the axis of the body, this main thing, attach it, the appendages attach to the axis. All movement when it's strongest comes from the, go crush it at work, girl. All of this comes from the axis of strength. You got to have your head engaged, your skull, your vertebral column, you guys, your sternum and your ribs. All of those things come together. Within this, we have all these different kinds of joints. And a joint is just a place where bones come together. Now, you have a couple different kinds of joints when it comes to all of this. I'm in the right-hand column of page 2 if you're trying to follow along. Okay, first one is you have fibrous joints. Now, these are the ones that are in your skull. You probably heard this, that when you were a baby, your skull had not grown together and gotten hard. You had these little cracks in your skull. Why is your skull not completely formed when you're born? Because you're going to grow. So as you grow, these bones come together and they are very fibrous. They don't move. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a good thing. Do you want the bones in your skull to be moving? No. You want them to be fibrous and stuck together. These say the sutures. Another word for sutures is like when you get stitches. You want those fibrous joints to be stuck together to protect what? Protecting your brain. Awesome. Okay, now you have what's called synovial joints. Now, synovial joints are elbow, shoulder, wrist, hips, knees. All of these joints that are encased in this beautiful sac called the synovial sac that's filled with what? Synovial fluid. What's the job of synovial fluid? What? Say it again loud. Help in range of motion. Hey, what kind of people are you? Okay. Do you want your synovial fluid to be thick and sticky or smooth and slicky? Smooth and slicky. Why? If it's smooth and slicky, what does that do to your range of motion? It increases your range of motion, especially pain-free. Okay. What happens to your range of motion as you increase your body temperature? It goes up. It's because the synovial fluid gets more slicky. It does. And something that's interesting is, as we tend to get a little bit older, it takes longer to warm up. We have to allow warm up time because we want that synovial fluid to allow that range of motion so it can be slick and quick instead of slow and stick. Think about that when it comes to synovial fluid. Has anyone in here ever made Jell-O? I know this is a weird question to ask. Never made Jell-O? Okay, so let me tell you how to teach you how to make Jell-O. So you go and you buy the box of Jell-O, and what it says is you have to heat water. Okay, you get it almost boiling. You get it almost boiling, and then you pour the powdered Jell-O in. And in that moment, when it's hot and warm, slick and quick, slick and quick. You take that Jell-O, that slick and lick, that slick and quick liquid, and you put it in the refrigerator. What happens to that Jell-O? It solidifies, and all of a sudden gets sticky and not slicky anymore. So we want our athletes to have that great chance of warming up without a doubt so that that synovial fluid gets really warm. Okay? You have this stuff called haline cartilage. And this is one of these things that coats the ends of our bone. You guys, cartilage is a beautiful thing because it really acts. Okay, look at me. Get your hands out. Okay, both hands. Okay, so what we see is whenever we think about cartilage, all right, it provides a smooth articulating surface. Okay, smooth articulating surface. All right, it acts as a shock absorber. It acts as a shock absorber, that cartilage does. And then the cool thing is it helps connect bone to bone. Okay, so all of a sudden, what does it do? A smooth surface, okay, a what? Say it. Shock absorber, and then a connector. That's game day. That's a play. That's a play in the playbook. Okay. What's the functions of cartilage? Functions of cartilage. Okay. Smooth articulating surface. Okay. What's next? Shock absorb. What was the other? Acts as a connector. So those are what haline cartilage does on the surface of all of those bones. Okay, again, we already mentioned synovial fluid, so we're rocking on. Now, we're going to talk about these joints, and I want you to know that you might have learned these differently in A&P, but it's my job to get you to speak the language of NSCA. So again, for the purposes of my game day training, you're going to need to know these like this. Okay, a uniaxial joint. Okay, what does uni mean? One. Okay, a uniaxial joint only moves in one plane. The best examples of this are your elbow and your knee. Okay, you might have learned those as hinge joints. Okay, those are uniaxial joints. They only move in how many planes? One plane. All right, then we have biaxial joints. This is basically the ankle and the wrist. It's kind of interesting to think that your wrist can move in this plane and your wrist can move this plane. Now, it can circumduct, but that's a different kind of thing. This is moving in two perpendicular axes. So again, feel it in yourself. Your wrist can actually move this way, and your wrist can move this way. Okay? Here's a question. Yes, this is circumduction. This is, remember that is not the same thing as the transverse plane. That's not rotation. There's a difference in rotation and circumduction. Okay? So these are, if it can move in two perpendicular planes, what kind of joint is that? Biaxial. Now, the last one we talk about is a multiaxial joint. A multiaxial joint can move in three different planes. The examples of these are shoulder and hip. You might have learned these as ball and socket joints, okay? And they can do so many different things. It can swing back and forth, it can move out to the side, and your hip itself can rotate your entire leg, okay? That's not circumduction. That is rotation. Okay, someone put the brakes if you don't understand. All of my online people, okay? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, so now let me tell you this. Review. What's the one that moves in one plane? Uniaxial. What about two? Biaxial. What about three? Multiaxial. All three of these are considered synovial joints. So they fall under the category of synovial joints. Everything we talk about is. Everything. Hey, the question was, is this a test question? And the answer is, everything is a test question. Okay? It's all from the playbook. It's all from the playbook. Okay. Now, the next thing is we're going to break down and we're going to talk about that beautiful vertebral column. Now, that vertebral column is kind of done in 5 different chunks. We actually start to talk about the vertebrae in the neck, then we talk about the ones in the upper back, then in the lumbar, and then down there in your pelvis, in your tailbone region. Okay? Now here's, repeat after me. 7, 12, 5, 5, 5. Again. Again. One more. Okay. Now, on this play, you need to understand that you cannot mix up the order of these unless you can do that in your own body, and you can't. So whenever I say how many vertebrae are in the cervical spine, what would you say? 7. Just 7. Look at your picture. Okay. Oh, it's not really on there. And that. The vertebral column. Yes. Okay. That's on page 2 still. It's that last paragraph there. Cervical vertebrae, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and then down there at the bottom, some people actually say you end up having another one down there, you guys. So it's 7, 12, 5, 5, 5, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and then coccygeal. Those bottom ones are there. Okay, and it's kind of funny because some people have 3 of them and some people have 5 of them. They say they don't really know why. It's kind of an interesting thing. Now, you need to know either if I say, tell me which of the regions of the vertebral column have 7 vertebrae, what would your answer be? Cervical. Awesome. So know all those forwards and backwards. Okay? If I ask you to list them in order, do you have to list them in order? Absolutely. Stacking from the top to the bottom. And let me tell you, it's imperative that you know this. Not only, this is a big mechanical. You know, we're talking about the Jaguar Mechanic. The reason you need to know this is Most Americans have some sort of back issue. And I hate that that's the way it is, but you may have a client or an athlete that comes to you and they say, hey, you know what? I had a major injury at and people that have injuries typically know where they are, okay? They'll come to you and they'll say, I had a major injury, and think about this. I want you to, okay, and don't cheat. Don't look around the room because I want you to learn. Don't memorize, learn, okay? If someone comes to you and says that they had an injury at C7T1, where would that be located? C7T1. Where? Put your hand on it. Okay. Hey, you feel that bump right there?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys, that's the top of your T. That's the big one there. So here's a question. So I have a client that comes to me, paying me big bucks because I'm a Jaguar mechanic. I'm telling you, it's awesome. But I'm new in the business and I'm stupid because I really didn't study. I just thought that I could win people's heart and I really didn't know what to do. So we end up, I see this person, and on the survey that we had taken, we talked about medical history, and I all of a sudden saw that they had an injury at C7T1. But I was not a Jaguar mechanic. I was a cut rate Honda 84 down the street used car mechanic. So I thought, oh my gosh, I get this person in the squat rack, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we're going to do back squat. Where does the bar sit on a back squat? Where does it hit? C7T1. So would a back squat be a contraindicated exercise for someone that has an injury there? It would be contraindicated, not recommended. You see what the book? You do not want them to do that exercise. So how would you modify that? You have them do a front squat. Okay, we have to know what's going on with our people. You've got to know about the spine. And what's interesting is not only are we in the business of loving people and helping people, but we can be held liable if we don't know our anatomy. Okay, let's keep going back to the whole thing with the Jag. If all of a sudden I'm paying big money for a car, something goes wrong, I'm paying big money to get that car fixed. And let's just say, what if they put brake fluid in the transmission? How well is that going to work? It's not going to work. You have to know your anatomy and how the body works. Say, got it when you got it?
Got it.
Awesome. Hey, jump over with me to page 3. And this is when we talk about the different layers. And we can look on page 3 and 4 at the same time. Page 4 has a great picture of a body that is basically a muscle sliced in half. And we start to see all of these things. We're on the outside of the muscle. We actually call that the epimyosin. But let me tell you what I want you to think of it as. Remember, what was the outside of the muscle what did I call that? The fascia. Excellent, Erica. That's the fascia of the foot. That's that epimyosin, that outside layering that is so important. Okay? And so if you look at it, friends, look over on the bottom of page 4, we actually start to see this epimyosin, see that deep fascia right there, that's that outer casing that we have to keep. Now remember, do we want that to be rigid or pliable? We want it to be pliable without a doubt. Okay, so that's that deep epimyosin. Then I've already quizzed you about this. We talk about a tendon. What does a tendon connect? Muscle to bone. Again, a fabulous picture of this tendon coming from the bone right there, plugging into the muscle. Okay, question. If we think about oxygen supply and we think about damage, once we damage a ligament or a tendon, which one actually has more available oxygen and healing supply? A muscle? I mean, yeah, a tendon or a ligament? A tendon. Why? It's connected to a what? It's connected to a muscle. Okay, now remember this. Right now, I have my gastroc going through my soleus, connecting to what? Achilles tendon, right now in my messed up world, okay? And it plugs in to my calcaneus, which is the name of that part of the heel bone. Okay, so think about that. It comes from the muscle, it comes together and plugs in to that heel. Now, are tendons pretty elastic? Do we want them to be really elastic? Yes or no? Yes, we do, because they're connected to those muscles that are that driving force within. Okay, so let's talk. We're still flipping back and forth because that's a great, great, great thing. All right, now what you're going to need to know too is just some landmark areas. And again, if you've had AMP or you're taking AMP, you're going to rock this. Okay, when something is proximal, it's closer to your trunk. When it's distal, it's far away. Okay, so do this. Proximal, distal. Do it. Proximal, distal. Proximal, distal. Proximal, distal. Put it in your brain cells. Put it in your body. Proximal, distal. Proximal, distal. Okay, now superior, inferior. Super smart, inferior feet. Superior, inferior. Superior, inferior. Okay, closer to the top is what? Superior. Down by closer to your feet is, okay, so here's the thing. If you think about where muscles' origins and insertions are, about where they begin and where they plug in, that's when we stop and think. And it's different with every single muscle based on whether it's a push muscle or a pull muscle. Okay, most of the muscles on the front of your body are those push muscles or pull muscles. Those are push muscles. Muscles on the posterior chain are mainly what? Pull muscles. Now let me tell you, typically, which one is weaker in Americans? Pull muscles. Why? Bingo. Okay, it's so funny. If you slice your body in half, I tell people, think about your anterior chain as your show muscles, those ones you show, okay? And the ones in the back are your go muscles. We need to work our posterior chain more than we work our anterior chain. Not only because they're the ones in the front, but think about it. How many of you, I want to see you doing this just for fun down the hall one time. I want to see you walking backwards down the hall. Okay, because do we use our anterior chain 1,000 times more? Okay, but we don't strength train to pull it back. Think about it, you guys. If you look at posture in most Americans, what does it look like? This is where we are. We need to train to be able to do what? Pull back. Pull those rhomboids and pull it back and all together. Okay, now if you look at this cool picture on page 4, you see it goes all the way down here to these little bitty muscle fibers. And in these little bitty fibers, every single time we move, it comes down to this thing called myofilaments. Again, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I like to give the analogy of, pretend like you have like a 1-inch piece of pipe, okay? And then you went and got like I'm trying to think, like where you would go, like you say you got a milkshake and you got a really bigger diameter straw, okay? So take that 1-inch pipe, put the big straws in it, and then put smaller straws in there, and then put coffee stirrers on the inside. That's how muscles work. So you got it when you got it? Yeah. Is that a good analogy to think about how muscles come together? Now, when it gets down to the tiniest contractile units, and you all know every time a muscle contracts, it shortens, and then when it extends, it lengthens. Excellent. Okay, now, give me your pinky finger. Okay, pinky finger, giant or small? Small. Small, okay. This is actin, okay, and it talks about these smallest myofilaments in your book. This is actin, and then take your index finger on the other side and put it on top of this. Actin, myosin. Actin, myosin. Small, large. Small, large. Small, large. Okay, now, every single time you move, like you just did it, Bailey, okay? You just did it, Sarah. When you blink, all the way down to that level, you have actin and myosin sliding and contracting on top of each other. So that myosin, like I said, that's that thin one. These are these bigger ones, sliding back and forth. Again, there's a great picture of that in the bottom left-hand corner of page 4 of actin and myosin. Those are those thin ones and the thick ones moving together. Now, every single time, hey, remind me of all the body systems to arrive on the scene, which one's first? Say it, nervous system. Okay, if you say it to me, I know you know it. And that way, whenever you have game day, you can execute the plays. Okay, now, what we see here is, if you look at this picture on page 5, here you see a neuron, a motor neuron, or a nerve cell, okay? Off the sides of it, you have all these things called dendrites. You don't need to know that, but you need to know that this is a neuron. And as that neuron is going down that chain, it is sending a message to the actin and the myosin. So whether you just blinked, whether you just crossed your arms, whatever you just did, your brain sent a message to that neuron to deliver that muscle to that actin and myosin to contract so that you could do that, so that you could do this, so that you could do that. Anything that you do, it comes down to the neuron feeding down its axis going into the muscle. So there's the neuron, and then you get to a point where the neuron has to plug into the muscle. But here's the thing. Think about a phone charger. If you take your phone charger and you plug it into an outlet, is there a tiny little space in between the charger and the outlet? Yes or no? Yes, there's a tiny space there. Now, what we know, that space, and it's mentioned in your book, is called the neuromuscular junction. It's where the neuron plugs into the muscle. Neuromuscular junction. Now, here's what we know. The smaller that gap, the quicker the signal. The smaller the gap, the what? Quicker the signal. Think about it like this. If you walk over and you barely plug it in, it actually is going to take longer for that phone to charge. All of a sudden, the cord might fall out, all of these things. You want to plug it all the way in, and you want to reduce that speed. Now, whenever you are learning new motor skills, maybe a motor skill you've never done before, do you think that that space is short, or you think there's a gap? There's a gap. How do you close the gap? Practice, training, excellent answers. And here's the thing. The more you train, the more you practice, what happens to the gap? Okay, so what happens to the skill? The skill goes up, because what's happening to the signal? It's quicker. It can get to the muscle quicker and get the job done. Now, another mechanism you're about to learn. Okay, everybody go like this. Okay, now, here's the thing. That's my code for an E. If you look at that, that's an E. Yes? It can be for you. Think about it. So E, efficient and effective. Okay? So when I say the motor neuron can be more, okay, anytime you see me, you say it out loud. Okay, so the goal of human movement skill is to be, okay, I want you to think back to maybe the last time you learned a new motor skill. Anyone want to share the last time they learned how to do something new? Perfect example. Okay, I'm going to let your friends see you. Okay, so you guys, you don't have anything to juggle. Bring us something to juggle tomorrow. Okay, bring us something to juggle. Isn't that cool? You guys, Aaron learned how to juggle. So here's my question. The first time you did it, Aaron, was it awesome or was it a train wreck? It was terrible. All of a sudden, you didn't know where to look. You didn't know where to catch. You had all of these things going on. But what happened after you practiced? It got better and better and better. So what do you think happened to the efficiency and effectiveness of the signal to be plugged into the right muscle? Now, here's the question. Do you really have to even think about it as much now to do it?
No.
No. It's awesome. Have y'all ever heard that once you learn how to ride a bike, you can ride a bike? It's the same thing. You don't forget how to ride a bike. Kiana, you don't forget how to ride a bike.
No.
You mean you think you can defy the laws of neurons? You're not that. You're awesome, but you're not that awesome. Okay? Once you learn how to do a motor skill, now it might get kind of rusty, but it will come back. It will come back. That's all due to your nervous system and having it plug into the neuromuscular junction. So I got it when you got it. Okay, what is this? You know what? That was not a completely wrong answer. I'm going to give you some credit there. But in the realm of physiology and the realm of anatomy, what is this? Actin. What is this? Myosin. And here's the thing. I'm rocking and rolling. Now listen, here's the thing. I told you they contract. They do. It's awesome. Let's take that to a little bit more efficient and effective word. Okay, that's actually called cross-bridging. So whenever actin and myosin contract, it's called cross-bridging. Now, cross-bridging. Okay. Let's take 3 minutes. Okay. I'm going to end this Zoom and have y'all jump into the new one so that they're in kind of 1 or 45-minute segments. So I got it when you got it? Go to the restroom, get a snack, all of those things. We'll be back in 5. Got it? All right. Very cool. Pardon? Okay.
Okay. It's all on like the links that you keep on sending us, right?
That, and then they're also on YouTube.
Okay.
Yep. You got it.
Wait. You say you send Monday? A Monday? It could be a Monday. Is that what we're getting? Is that what we're getting at?
Kiana, I love you.
I see tomorrow.